Hello friends, and welcome back to another video. Hopefully you can hear me okay without too much of the background noise. I've talked about this before, but I guess it's just such an annoyance to me sometimes. But the laundry room is like in the hallway where the bedrooms are, and it is just the loudest thing whenever someone is doing laundry. No matter where you are in the house, you can hear it. So hopefully you cannot hear that, but if you do, I apologize. I've got to fit in the filming where I can because I'm about to be very busy. So I wanted to go ahead and record this because it is a new month. We are officially in the month of February, which that even just saying that and having that realization is so weird, because I feel like January felt like it was a whole year, but then at the same time I feel like I blinked and we're in February. So anyways, long story made short, thanks for being here, thanks for clicking on the video. Today we're going to be getting into my wrap up for the month of January. I don't think I did a wrap up for December. I think December was kind of crazy. We were quite busy, obviously, with the holiday season and everything going on. So I think I forgot, but that's okay. We're going to pick it up where we're at now, and we're going to talk about what I read this month. Now, a lot of these books, I'm just pulling up my Goodreads really quick so I can see it. But a lot of these books I actually read on my Kindle, which I'm excited about. I got one for Christmas, and it's funny because I kept telling myself for the longest time, I'm not going to buy a Kindle. I've had previous Kindles, not the Paperwhite, but I've had like the Kindle Fire and things like that. And if you've ever had one before, if you know anything about them, those are trash. They're not very good. So I was really hesitant to buy any kind of Kindle. But it just seems like it was everywhere, and it was just constantly in my face. And I was like, well, the only way I'm gonna know if it's worth the buy and the reason for all the hype is to just get one. So thankfully Anthony got me that for Christmas, so I've been loving it, I do have to say that. But it is a beautiful Saturday right now. It is February 1st, if I haven't said that, and it is so beautiful outside. It's like clear blue skies. It's beautiful temperature. I think it's probably like in the 50s or something like that, which is odd because just like a week and a half ago we were in like near negative degree temperatures. So global warming, anyone? Yeah, but I'm gonna be thankful for what we have right now. I feel a little bit rejuvenated with this weather. So let's go ahead and just jump right into the books that I read this month. I will not deny it. This month did feel like a struggle when it came to reading. I don't think I had fully registered that I was in a reading slump until maybe I think it was like my second or third book of the month. And then I was like, why do I feel like it is just so hard for me to pick up a book? And even a book that I'm somewhat enjoying, I don't want to pick it up. And then I realized, okay, well, it sounds like I'm probably in a reading slump. So I did not think I was going to read many books. To be honest, I wasn't even sure if I was going to be able to finish some of these books. And some I did not. I'll kind of still briefly talk about, or at least let you know, some of the books that I did pick up that I had to put down. I think it might have only been one, though. But let's start off with the first book that I read in the year. I'm not really going to go in any particular order. I think it's just going to play out that way because I've only read so many books so far. I did read and finish 6 books this month. So that is good. That is a lot better than I thought I was going to be. I did set a reading goal in my Goodreads app this year for 60. So, yeah. Hopefully, I will get out of this reading slump sooner than later because I think I'm still struggling a little bit. But The first book that I read this month was The Husbands, and that was by Holly Gramazio. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. This book was really, really interesting. I remember Haley Pham talking about it, and she had said some pretty good things about it and enjoyed it, so it sounded like it would be something that I just kind of wanted to kind of pick up and explore a little bit. But the whole idea behind this book is that we have our main character who I cannot remember the name of, so let's see. I'm so bad with remembering names, and I don't think I realized that until I started doing Booktube, and realizing when I want to talk about these books, I just don't remember anything. She has such a classic name. Her name is Lauren. Okay, but we have our main character, Lauren, and one night she goes and hangs out with her best friend, and when she comes back and returns to her home, she is greeted at the door by this man who is her husband. However, Lauren doesn't have a husband. Lauren has never been married, at least to her recollection, so she's completely overwhelmed, completely confused, and honestly freaked out and scared, which rightfully so. I would be freaked out if I came home and there was a random man at my house basically looking at me like, why am I freaking out? We're married. But the entire idea behind this is that I think she lives in a house, but it may be an apartment. But we're going to say it's a house because there's an attic. So, the whole entire idea is that when her husband goes up into the attic, a new husband comes down. Now, I think what I'm trying to understand, though, is how the first husband initially got in the house to begin with. Like, I don't remember if that was ever actually explained, but that is the whole idea. And I mean, she has gone through so many husbands throughout this entire book. It is quite interesting. There is a moment in time where she does kind of, there is a husband that comes down that she spends a little bit more time with, but it is definitely one of those books you kind of just have to read to kind of unpack the story, because if I say too much, I'll give things away. So this one I did end up rating 4 stars. So I do remember it. I do remember enjoying it when I was reading it. I think this was the last book that I read that I felt like I was actually enjoying. But this was very much, I think, the beginning stages of that reading slump, because once I put that book down, I was over it. But yeah, definitely a good book. I think it's worth checking out if you haven't checked it out yet. I also think this is a debut novel from this author, so pretty interesting concept, and I'm kind of excited to see what she'll come out with whenever she writes another book. So yeah. Now the next book that I read, I do have it physically here, but this was a part of my husband picks the books that I read in the month, and let me just be honest, I only read 2. I've only read 2 of those books. I still do intend to read the other 2 that he picked out. The reading slump really took it out of me. So this next one is going to be Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco, and this has been something that has been on my radar for a long time. It is a part of a series. We've got the other 3 books up here. I don't know what all of them are about, but I think they are about particular, I was going to say historical figures, but like particular people that you hear. Like I think there's a Dracula one, Houdini, and then there's another one. So like all of these particular like people that you may have heard about from back in the day. But this one obviously centers around the serial killer Jack the Ripper, and I had a lot of fun reading this book. I read the other series by Carrie Maniscalco, which I always forget what it's called. I think it's called Kingdom of the Wicked, and I did enjoy that one. And this one I think was her debut, so it was pretty interesting to finally pick this one up. I did have a lot of moments where I was cringing and just kind of really grossed out, because she talks about certain things, and if you know anything about Jack the Ripper, those murders were really gruesome. So just kind of hearing the descriptions of that was a lot for me sometimes, because I'm just not good with that stuff. And that's just me personally. I think if you don't mind those things, or if you can see past it, there's no reason why you wouldn't enjoy this book. But yeah, this one was a lot of fun. I actually read this one in a day pretty much. We ended up having a snow day at the beginning of the month, and I was like, well, might as well just sit in the house and read until I can't read anymore. And that's pretty much what I did. But I think in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have done that, because that was a lot to take on in the beginning stages of a reading slump. But that's okay. If you haven't checked out Stalking Jack the Ripper, though, I highly recommend it. It is a fun little... I say fun with... I'm laughing because it's like the idea behind it is not fun, but like it is a nice twist on a story that we have heard so many times. It is an interesting take on this person or character that we've heard about for years and years and years and years and years and years and years. And it was also satisfying to have a reveal in this book. So it does reveal some things in this book. So yeah, it very much concluded the story, which was quite nice. And there is also a little bit of romance built into this too. Our main character, I think her name is Audrey Rose. She has a love interest in this book. And if I'm not mistaken, it might be throughout the entire series, and I really liked their dynamic and how they interact with each other. And yeah, I don't know, I thought that was really a nice piece that kind of weighs out some of the more harder parts in the book. So if you haven't checked it out, like I said, I highly recommend that you do. I don't think I said the star rating, I also gave this one a 4 stars. All right, I think this was my last physical read. Is it my last physical read? Yeah, this one's my last physical. So this one is going to be another pick from when Anthony picked my reads for the month. And this is 1984 by George Orwell. This one is obviously a classic. This has been out for years. This came out in 1949, I believe. And yeah, I was interested to some degree to pick this up, just because I think when he first originally bought this, he kind of gave me a little bit of like a synopsis on what this book was about. And I thought it was like a really interesting idea. And it also felt like something that was still relatable to this day. And I think that's what makes, books a classic, when you can still relate to characters or situations years and years and decades and centuries later, which is pretty cool. So I think this one is something that we can 100% relate to even more now in this day and age, but I'm gonna leave that alone. But it follows our main character, Winston, I believe is his name, and this whole kind of like political movement and dystopian like world where it feels very much like they are back in like World War II era. Like that's very much the vibe I get from it. However, it feels like you can also see this happening now. But let's go back to it feeling like the World War II era, where it feels like things are, they talk about like rationing things and like how that kind of plays out. People are not in the best place when it comes to money and things like that, but that also has a lot to do with the control that the government is playing, or what they call Big Brother. And it's actually really kind of scary. I think I was kind of thrown off because in most books, your main character is meant to be likable. You want to relate to this character. You want to root for this character. I'm going to be honest. I did not really care for our main character in this book. He is not really the nicest, but also given the situation that he is in and the things that he has gone through in his life, that has obviously played a huge part. And I think that is the thing that I take away from it the most, is just really seeing how humanity can shift and change due to certain circumstances or situations and things of that nature. So it does a really great job of depicting that and what it looks like when people are afraid. So I think that's a really thing to take away and kind of remember anytime you are ever like looking at the news, especially nowadays if you live in the States. You hear a lot of things happening in the world right now, or at least here in this country, and you're always going to just hear the negative things, and it's a great tactic because it instills fear. It keeps you on edge. It keeps you coming back for more, and it's meant to do that. And I think this book does such a good job of showing how that works. Also, so weird, but there was a part in this book where these little kids were talking about, I don't want to even get into detail, but they were talking about this particular event that was taking place. The fact that I'm even calling it an event is crazy, but it's just like, these are young children, and why are they excited for this? Like, it's sickening. It's really sickening. Yeah, it was giving very much. It was definitely giving a Hunger Games vibe. Like, if you think back to Hunger Games and District 12 and what that was like, that's what it gives me. And then you've got, President Snow and his government coming in and controlling things and instilling fear and having these games. There's no games or anything like that in this, but it kind of feels like you're playing a game. They'll do these weird things where it's like they'll tell you one thing and then you're just supposed to believe it. Like, even though yesterday you clearly remember that there was chocolate, they're like,
there was never chocolate. There's no such thing as chocolate. I don't know what you're talking about.
Like, that's crazy. But yeah, this book was very interesting. I think now, even talking about it and kind of what I feel when I think about this book, I wasn't really sure how I ultimately was going to rate this book, because when I was reading it, I really struggled to pick the book back up. I do think that had a lot to do with the reading slump, but I also struggled because there was a lot of gruesome details and just hatred, and it left me feeling really uncomfortable. But I think that is so important at the same time, if that's weird to say. And I originally gave this book 3 stars, but the more that I think about it, I kind of feel a little bit different about it now. I would say it's definitely leaning more towards that 3.5 or 4 stars for me, because I really feel like I took a lot from that book, and ultimately I did enjoy it. That was probably one of my favorite books this month. So all right, let's see. So the next couple of books that I did read were either as audiobooks or on my Kindle. This next one, I actually read this as like a palate cleanser to try to fit in something that was a little bit more light and fluffy after reading such hard books back to back. I think reading Stalking Jack the Ripper, dealing with the things that you get from that, and then also going into 1984, it was just a lot. So I needed something a little bit more light and fluffy. And by this point, I knew I was in a reading slump. I already knew that's where I was. And so I wanted to find something light and fluffy, and also something a little bit shorter, because one of those things that I like to do when it comes to getting out of a reading slump is finding quick, easy reads. So that's why I leaned towards this, and I regret it. It was not good. This was Same Time Next Year by Tessa Bailey. I've never read a Tessa Bailey book before, so this is a new era, or this is a new author to me. I don't know if this is how her writing typically is, or if it's just because it was a short book. I think this book was, it might have only been like 70 pages. Like, this is a very, very short book, a very easy read in that respect. Okay, no, so it's 144 pages. It's still very short. And this centers around our main character, Britta, I believe is her name. And I don't remember the guy's name in this book, but Britta is our main character. She is a waitress. This town that they live in is a very big hockey town, and she has a half brother who is like a hockey player, and on his team is our love interest. And all of this is taking place during New Year's. And this hockey player is from Canada, I think it is. And in order for him to stay, because he's doing so good and it might be getting himself a deal, they don't want him to leave, so they need to come up with a plan. And they come up with this plan that she needs to marry him. And we just go from there. I will say this book, I was excited for it just because I thought it would be cute to read something that had a New Year's theme around it for the beginning of the year. I just did not enjoy this book at all. I ended up giving this a 2 stars, and my biggest issue with this book was just these characters felt really flat. And I know that this is a short book, but there could have still been some more dimension to them. They could have felt a little bit more real if we had just taken more time to develop the character and focus less on the spice. There was so much spice in this book, and this is probably the first book, at least that I can think of off the top of my head, that made me uncomfortable. I was completely uncomfortable when I was reading those spice scenes. So yeah, if you're not a big fan of spice, definitely don't read this book. Yeah, I ultimately gave this one a 2 stars. Not it for me. I'm good. And if this is how Tessa Bailey writes, then she is definitely not going to be an author that I pick up again. That's just... So another book that I attempted to read during this month, and I say attempted because I ultimately had to DNF this book, unfortunately. So it's not a book that I completed, but I attempted to read it, and that is Variation by Rebecca Yarros. You probably know Rebecca Yarros by now. If you don't, I don't know where you've been. You must be living under a rock, because she is probably the biggest author right now with her Imperium series, which the latest installment has just come out this past month. We'll talk about that here shortly. But yeah, I did not like this book. I don't remember the main characters' names. I just remember one is a ballet dancer. The other one is really big into swimming and wanted to be like one of those people that does like rescue missions for people, I guess, like in the ocean. And they met because of an instance with him being in a boat with his brother, and her sister being in a boat and having to rescue some people. But it starts off that way, and I think I remember when I first read the book, I was like, what is happening right now? I don't know what's going on. I don't know how this relates to anything, because I don't think I mentioned this yet, but I'm not really trying to read the synopsis of books or get too much information before I read. I really want to go into these books a little bit more blind this year, and so far it is not panning out to be the best, but needless to say. Anyways, it then goes back into the future, and it's just, I don't know. I think I don't even know how far I got into this book, actually. I probably only got, let's see. I think I only got like 40% through the book, and I just was like, yep, I'm just going to put it down. I'm obviously not enjoying it. I'm not going to waste my time with it. I'm just going to put it down. It was probably the smartest move that I made this year. So no rating for that one. But the last 2 books that I read and I just finished these. So the one I'm about to talk about, I just finished like 2 days ago, and that is another Rebecca Yarros book, which is the one that recently came out, Onyx Storm. This is a part of the Imperium series, and it is the third installment. So if you've not read Fourth Wing, you want to read that, and then Iron Flame before you read this one. But I don't even know where to begin with this. I have a whole video coming out where I talk about my thoughts and feelings on this book, so I'm not going to dive too deep into it. If you want to know my thoughts and feelings on this book, I will definitely recommend that you look at this video that is going to be out either before this one or after. So keep a lookout for that. But I gave this, what did I give this? 2 stars? Oh my god. I gave this book as 2 stars, which is really bad in comparison to my thoughts and feelings for Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, which I was giving those books like 5-star ratings, because at the time those books were giving me what I needed. Iron Flame was good. I hated the ending. There was a lot of info dumping and a lot of things happening, but I still, I enjoyed that book way more than I enjoyed this one. I didn't enjoy this one. This one felt like we were all over the place, a lot happening without anything really happening. So, yeah, that is my thoughts on that book. I think that it also just left on another cliffhanger. It felt, I don't know. But like I said, if you want to know my actual thoughts, I recorded my thoughts later the same day that I finished the book. So that one's a little bit more fresh, and I really go into what I was thinking when I was reading this series, or when I was reading this book. So you want to know that, like I said, look out for that video. It'll probably be like probably be titled something like Chats About Onyx Storm or something like that. So anyways, last book that I read, and I finished this one yesterday because I was dead set on finishing Onyx Storm and this next book before the month ended. There was no way I was not going to. And this next book was actually a book that I talked about in my top 10 most anticipated for 2025. And I've not read a book by this author until this one. And this is Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. And I didn't know what to expect. I remember reading the synopsis a little bit because I kind of felt like I needed to. I couldn't just go based off of the cover. And I've never read a book by this author before, so I had no idea what I was getting into. Did not know. I'm assuming that he writes horror books, but yeah. This book was good. This book kind of helped the reading slump, shall I say. This one I ended up giving a 4 stars. And it starts off really interesting, where we find our main character. Her real name is Neva, but you'll find out if you read this book that she also goes by another name, and that name is Fern. And that all gets explained when you read the story, obviously. But she is a young lady who has fallen pregnant, and I think she is 14 or 15, around that range, and it's also set in the 70s. So in this point in time, during that era, that was a pretty bad thing. I mean, I think that there's still a lot of stigma around it, and I get why. Don't get me wrong, I understand why, but it's still kind of, I guess in a way, frowned upon, although it's kind of also been normalized in some capacity. But back then, it was really bad, and they had these homes that these girls would go to, and we find Neva traveling with her father to one of these homes. And I think it's actually so brave that a male author decided to take on a story with that being the main focus, and speaking as a voice of a woman, which is interesting. I loved this book. There were definitely some slow moments, and obviously you have the word witchcraft in the title, so you're expecting there to be a lot of my initial thought was that we were going to see something with witches, and I will say you do, but I think I was hoping for a little bit more. But needless to say, this is definitely intense at some points. There were definitely a lot of moments, again, where I cringed because I felt uncomfortable or grossed out. Keep in mind, this is a horror book, so if you're not a big horror fan, you probably don't want to read this book. But if you're looking for a new author and you want to get into a new genre and horror is one of your things, I definitely recommend checking this book out. It is very good. The entire thing is not horror. You get a good mixture of those moments where you're like, oh my God, oh my God. And I think one thing I did remember very vividly while I was reading this book was there were times where I was reading this and I listened to part of this book as an audio. And I remember taking my dog for a walk at night and feeling like really anxious. And I was like, maybe this is not the book to read right now. But that's good. Like, you want, when you're reading a horror book or a thriller, you want to feel those feelings. Actually, any book, you want to feel whatever it's meant to be depicting. So I think he did a great job with that. And I am excited to maybe pick up a few more of his books. I think there was another one, and I think I seen this one last year. I can't remember the name, but I know it has something to do with like vampires or something southern vampires, something. I don't know. I'll put the picture of it here. But I want to check that book out next. So yeah, that is it. Those were all the books that I read this month. And some were good, some were not so good. So we'll see how this next month goes. I already have a couple of books that I'm going to read actually starting today. Today, we didn't actually do it this month, or we didn't actually do it in January, but my friend Jessica and I, we always do a buddy read pick. We started that last year, and we just kind of forgot. I think December hit and just everything kind of just went out the window. So when January rolled around, I think we were like maybe 2 or 3 days in, and I was like, oh my God, we never picked a book for this month. So we ended up saying, okay, we'll start February. So I picked it's a Catherine Center book, and that is The Bodyguard. So we're going to start that one today. And then I'm really trying to find some new authors with substance that I enjoy. And so I'm going to check out Sally Rooney and see what her books are about. The first one I'm going to check out is Beautiful World, Where Are You? So yeah, those are the 2 books that I'm going to get started on reading this month. So we'll see how that goes. But anyways, let me know in the comments down below how your reading month went, if you are planning to read any of the books that I talked about. And yeah, so far, what was the favorite book that you have read this year? We're only at the beginning, but let me know what you've enjoyed reading so far. Anyways, that is it. Thank you guys for hanging out with me, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!